A very good morning to all our attendees for today, and welcome to UB Open Day 2022. My name is Nadiha, and I am the president of the University at Buffalo Student Council, and today I will be your MC. For this year's UB Open Day, we have a variety of sessions and activities for everyone, and I hope all of you guys are as excited as I am about it. Before we start off proper, I'd like to hear a few sentiments from the audience. We have prepared a few Slido questions that you guys can participate in. Please scan the QR code or type in the code 2238207 on slido.com. Okay, so are you guys in already? Yeah? Okay, then let's start with the first question. So in 1 or 2 words, how are you feeling today? Are you guys feeling excited to learn more about SIM-UB? Or maybe curious about what the UB programs has to offer for you guys? Or maybe you guys are maybe feeling a bit anxious because you guys have some concerns about the UB programs. Feel free to just let us know how you are feeling today. Okay, so someone is just feeling yes. Okay, so I see that a number of you guys are curious and excited about what are the programs we have today for you guys. So, you know, throughout today, through the panel sessions, through the activities that we have for you guys will be able to learn more about the UB programs and satisfy your curiosity. So let's move on to the next question. What is your preferred teaching delivery mode? So personally, for me, I entered SIM-UB in the middle of a pandemic, and I've experienced both online and offline teaching modes. And so far, I've enjoyed both delivery modes, like both physical and also on Zoom. The professors at UB, they really put in their effort to make classes more engaging, whether it's for an online and offline class. So what I can see that a lot of people are like mixed between hybrid as well as face-to-face. So yeah, now that there's a relaxation of the restrictions, we have more face-to-face and hybrid classes. So you guys can look forward to that. Okay, so the final questions is your preference of major. Wow, okay, so seems like a lot of people are interested in communications. I myself am a communications major. And so if you guys would like to learn more about communications, we have the booths that talks about the majors outside of these lecture theater that you guys can take a look afterwards. All right. So now let us begin our first panel session for today, which we will be discussing about the pathways to success through the landscape of the novel challenge. Dr. Kevin McKelvey, our resident director, will be the moderator for this session, along with Dr. Frank Tatsau, Dr. Thomas Saltzman, and Dr. Kristen Tew as the panel speakers. I will now pass the time to Dr. Kevin McKelvey to kick off the first panel session.
Okay, thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Nadiha, and a very big welcome to our audience here at SIM on campus, as well as to the audience that's watching online on various platforms. A big welcome to you, and I hope you'll have an enjoyable time today learning about the UB programs. Before we begin with our panel, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction about University at Buffalo and our program here at SIM in order to put this into context so you can better understand about our program and what you might potentially be applying for. So I would like to say that it's not an online program, just to make sure everyone is abundantly clear about this. We launched our program here as a in-person program, and then were compelled by circumstances to convert to entirely online at various stages throughout the pandemic. But as Nadiha mentioned, in the recent times with the relaxation of restrictions here in Singapore, we've been able to reopen more of our in-person classes, and anyone I would say who's joining now can fully expect that the majority of classes in the future will be in person rather than online, but with some potential for some hybrid as well, depending on how the pandemic and the COVID situation evolves over time. We always follow whatever is the most up-to-date guidance from the Singapore authorities about that. So our collaboration here with SIM is very long-lived. A quarter of a century we've been working here together between SIM and UB to deliver programs, starting with an EMBA program. And as for our undergraduate program, which we're talking about today, it was actually launched 18 years ago. I came here in person at that time to help launch the program, and we've been growing ever since. We started with one major in 2004 in business administration and have since added all of the additional majors. So we're very happy to be celebrating our 18th anniversary this year. Another important point that you'll see here is that we are fully accredited by the relevant agencies, both here in Singapore and in the United States. So you can rest assured that this is a very robustly monitored and accredited program. Next, please. So our university is part of a very huge university system in the state of New York in the United States of America. We are considered to be the flagship institution within the SUNY systems. SUNY is State University of New York. And that system consists of many different campuses of different types, including 4 different research universities. We are the biggest of those 4 research universities in Buffalo, New York, and we also are a member of the what's known as the AAU, Association of American Universities. This is the top quality research universities in the United States. I'm sure you would recognize many of the names such as Harvard and Yale and Stanford and MIT that are also members of the AAU. So that is the kind of company that we keep as members of that organization. This is just a map that shows the State University of New York system. Each one of those dots is a different campus of our system. So it's a very huge and reputable system of higher education. In fact, the biggest system of public higher education in the US. And our campus is in the far western part of the state on the border with Canada. We're actually very close to Niagara Falls, if you're familiar with our US geography. And this is what we offer here. I won't go into great detail, but you can talk to the representatives of our different majors who are outside today. After our panel is over, you can consult with them about the different things that you're interested in. Please note as well that you can combine any of the majors together into either a double major or a double degree, which is something that's very popular with our students here in Singapore. And so I just would like to go through what I consider the very strong selling points of our program quickly, our connection to the home campus. So if you join the University at Buffalo, you are eligible actually to go over to the home campus and spend part of your time there. You can do the entire program here in Singapore, but for many of our students, that's a nice advantage to be able to go over at some point and study at the home campus. We also have an excellent faculty. 3 representatives of our faculty are here today. You can take courses here in Singapore from faculty who come over and teach the entire courses here in Singapore, and then go back if you want at some point in the future and have the same professors teaching you in Buffalo, New York. So that has certain advantages as well. Extremely strong community here led by Nadiha and her student council, but also beyond that, there's a very robust alumni network. And it's one of the things I'm really, really proud of with our program and how well we weathered this pandemic was the mutual support that we all gave each other between students supporting faculty, faculty supporting students, our staff working together. It's really quite heartwarming to see that we have such great bonds within our community here in Singapore. It's an incredible value. It costs the same degree that you would earn by going to Buffalo, New York, you can get here in Singapore at a fraction of the cost. It could be as much as a third less, depending on the types it could be a third of what you would pay to go to the US by completing the degree here. So it is an incredible value. You can read about all of these, by the way, in our brochure, so you can see the details. But the last point I think here, and the strongest one of all, is the excellent quality of our pedagogy, delivered by our faculty, and the incredible learning outcomes that we get as a result of that, that make our graduates here in Singapore very unique and very employable. So just the curriculum, we'll talk about this with our faculty, but it is very, very interactive. We believe in the US that people learn best by learning from experience. So we'll talk to our faculty about that topic and the different kinds of projects that students carry out in their classes. But it means that students come away with a very, very strong skill set of specific kinds of skills like public speaking, presentation skills, and so on, as well as just general life skills such as time management, attention to detail, and all of these things that are a result of the different kinds of experiential activities built into our curriculum. So, the curriculum is very intentional. It produces absolutely incredible graduates here in Singapore who really stand out within the landscape as being good quality future workers within all kinds of different fields. And so there are details here about the application coming up, but I would just advise you talk to our staff outside after the panel discussion today, and you can learn more about that. And that's it for my introduction. So we'll turn now to our panelists, and we will ask them about various topics. So let's start with Dr. Frank Tutzauer, who is the former chair of the communication department here. And Frank, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, your research, your connection with SIMUB,
Sure.
and yeah.
Is this on? Good. I don't use a microphone very often. When I lecture in a class like this, I just shout. But yeah, so my name is Frank Tutzauer. I'm in the Department of Communication. I have been the chair of the Department of Communication, but I've turned the reins over. I've been at UB for more than 30 years. Yeah, you see the color of the beard, right? I'm an old man. I've been teaching at SIM for 10 years, since 2012, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I teach interpersonal communication, network analysis, and conflict theory. And Singapore may be my favorite place on earth. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you, Frank. And next we have the chair of the finance department at UB, that is Professor Chu Christian from finance.
Thank you. It's my fifth year teaching in Singapore, third year in person. What I do in terms of my research is investments and determinants of performance. Some of these things actually overlap with what faculty in the comm department do. I like Singapore. More than Singapore itself, I like the people in Singapore. Would love to have more students from here.
Okay, and now we have Dr. Tommy Saltzman from psychology.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm a lecturer and researcher with UBSIM. I completed my graduate work at UB, so I've been in the system with UB for almost 10 years now. I've been teaching with UBSIM for about 2 years. So I came in fall or spring 2020, and then the pandemic happened, and then I came back for spring 2021, and I've been here ever since. In terms of what I teach social psychology. So basically understanding how individuals interact with one another and different social situations. I teach a cyber psychology course where we examine how psychology might change depending on technological influences. And I teach classes on psychophysiology, how people deal with stress and cope with different stressful situations.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. So we'll turn now to some of the questions for our panelists on this topic for today, which is, what are the different kinds of challenges, as well as, I would say, the different opportunities that we now have. We're coming out of the pandemic, and how our program and our curriculum might help people navigate their way through this novel landscape. So just to put things into a context, I think, as everyone knows, we are now starting to recover from a period of time where we had different kinds of shutdowns and disruptions to all sorts of things within our previous pre-pandemic lives, including economic issues, things with the supply chain. Of course, there are social issues that have arisen, psychological issues for certain individuals. There are many, many, many ways that we can look at this now. So my question for our panelists today is if you could just talk to us and tell us about what you think that somebody majoring within your department, what are the different kinds of things that they would be able to acquire and use for moving forward in the future as we are now making this kind of transition to the post-COVID world. So let's start with Dr. Tutzauer.
In the Department of Communication, there are many types of things, courses and so forth that would help with that. We teach classes in health communication. We teach classes on new technology, Zoom. We all know Zoom now, right? Even in my network analysis class, what is a network? A network is fundamentally a bunch of things connected together. And they could be many, many different types of things and many, many different types of connections. And what I do, the very first network we look at in the network analysis class is a contact tracing network. And I only started doing this because of COVID, right? I didn't do it before. But you can see immediately like who the super spreaders are, or if you're testing, who should be tested next. So it's a very, very good type of thing in terms of subjects. But also, I think in terms of the people and the students between here and Buffalo, I forgot to mention, before COVID, I would say that about 10% of my undergraduate students were from Singapore, okay? Now, nobody's been back since COVID, but so take advantage of this. It's a really, really good opportunity. I remember one time, it happened to be a particularly warm fall and beginning of the winter, and 5 of my Singaporean students came up to me. They were getting ready to leave. The semester was almost over, and they were so distraught because it had been warm and they wanted to see snow. Okay, so come to Buffalo. I'll get some snow for you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Frank. Christian, how about in the field of finance?
Well, sure. So, just starting with COVID and I guess the impact on the world economy. All central banks try to help us all sit at home for a while, and then now that we're recovering, the bills for those actions are due, and they put a strain on the world economy, and then we're all thinking that the world economy actually will go into a crisis. Heard heads of, I guess, large banks saying these things. Well, for finance, for the world of investments, at least, that's a bit of an opportunity, because if you're thinking about the environment before COVID, what was happening is that we lived in a world in which the sort of central banks of the world pumped money in the world's economies, stock markets basically, and then just the prices of any assets went up. And then basically there wasn't much opportunity actually for identifying mispricing in markets. So hedge funds, people who invest, they couldn't make money. Right now, that had to stop because the after COVID bills are high. And then there's more opportunity for people actually in the world of investments. There's more volatility in the markets. So more interesting times for finance. I think we've learned to network better with people that we would not meet in person also otherwise. We have a master's program, for example, in the finance department that has been running for over 20 years. And now there's an ecosystem of graduates that help current students find jobs. And then it was very difficult to get these people together because, you know, one of them is a managing director of Bank of America. Another one is now a managing director at the London Stock Exchange Group in London. So it's very difficult to put these people together in a room. With Zoom, this is a little bit better. They get to meet our students, they get to talk to them. I sort of liked, I guess, that we moved on Zoom and then we continue to educate our students. I kind of dislike that I couldn't see them in person. I've seen my own kids actually, one of them in college, one of them in high school taking courses online, and I resented that. So I'm happy that we're back.
Yes, thank you, Christian. So I might also mention that in addition to finance, our business administration program also offers some other concentrations. One of the concentrations is in finance, but there's also one in supply chain and operations management. It seems with all of the disruptions nowadays to global supply chains, that's also a pretty useful thing to be looking at nowadays.
I had never heard of a supply chain till COVID.
When my yogurt disappeared, that's when I really realized this is serious, you know, life without yogurt. We got used to that early on. So now the thing we're getting used to is the volatility. So I don't know about other people, but I feel I need to be sedated. So we'll talk to next Tommy. Tommy is a psychologist. Yes.
I mean, I think one thing I've thought about throughout this pandemic is the fact that some of the people who have been most impacted by all of this and all the disturbances have been our young individuals who are seeking careers or trying to figure out what they want to do. And that becomes very difficult when there's so many different factors changing all at once and so much uncertainty. I would say that in terms of psychology, one thing that this pandemic has, I think, shown us is that mental health is extremely important. And I think mental health is something that many companies, many organizations weren't as concerned about talking about for a very long time. But I think what has happened during COVID is that mental health issues have very much become part of the forefront and become something that is part of the discussion with different companies, with universities, with different organizations. So it has made us realize that this is something we need to pay attention to. And fittingly, I mean, during the pandemic, we've seen depression, we've seen anxiety, we've seen loneliness, all skyrocket, and particularly among our youth. So I think one thing that psychology can do and prepare you for is to help a lot of people with the problems and the challenges that are going to be facing all of us over the next several years as we cope with all the disturbances and all the things that have happened over the past 2 years. So there are many ways to do this within the psychology field. You could work directly with patients working through their problems. You could be a counselor, you could be a therapist, and our program will train you to begin with those skills and prepare you for programs where you could specialize and pursue a career as a therapist and a counselor working directly with people. The other area in which psychology really focuses is research. And that's been my primary focus, really thinking about and observing what will help individuals cope with different stressors, particularly stressors that are associated with the uncertainty and the volatility that we've seen. So just as an example of this, I currently do research with a number of my undergraduate students. They are my research assistants and they work with me on various projects looking at how people deal with different stressful situations. So I focused on basically my research using cardiovascular responses to track how people experience different stressors in the moment And so I've researched how people cope with decision making and difficult decisions among many options. I have focused on research looking at different coping techniques that are often prescribed, like mindfulness techniques and things like this. But I currently have students who are focused on social media and how social media has contributed to stress and coping over the past several years, particularly among our youth. So one of my students is currently doing a project looking at how Singaporean students and Buffalo students actually cope with and use social media and how it affects their daily lives. So I would say that psychology will prepare you to do a lot of good and help a lot of people, whether that's working directly with those people or whether that's researching interventions or researching clinical strategies that will help people manage some of the problems that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. And in fact, I would say Tommy has spoken very eloquently about the situation since COVID has begun and so on. But even before COVID, I would say, you know, my experience with Singapore is that it is, ever since I have been here, it has been a society in transition, and that creates stress in its own right. So psychology, I think, has always been popular among our students who are thinking about what they can do to help young people and people in general here in Singapore, but even more so, it really has been accelerated and exacerbated, I would say, by the pandemic to make it a very relevant field nowadays.
Let me jump in too and say a lot of students double major in psych and comm.
Yeah, actually, it is one of the great selling points of our program is that you do have that opportunity to combine any two of our majors or into either a double degree or a double major. And so whatever you think is going to help you to advance your own career, you could make a great combination like that. So let's turn to the next topic, which I'd like to talk a bit about the pedagogy within our program. And so we are here in Singapore. It's an American university. If you enroll in our program, what you will experience by studying here without ever having to go to the United States is an actual American style pedagogy. And so if our panelists can each talk about that, how do you feel that that particular pedagogy, the way that you teach, helps to contribute to the skill set and the abilities of students coming out, and how that will help them on two levels. One, if they are looking for employment in the future, and the other one is for many of our students, they go on to graduate studies as well. So let's go back to that topic with Dr. Tutzauer.
Yeah, I confess that I don't know much about education systems around the world other than the US model, except every time I come to Singapore, we do a faculty orientation, and Kevin tells us a little bit about the type of education you guys got in before coming to college, to the university. However, the way I approach it is I don't want a barrier between me and the students. I want a back and forth. I want an interaction. So my style is very casual. I joke around. I walk around. I shout sometimes. I walk around the room. But just because I'm casual doesn't mean I take the material seriously, and I expect my students to take the material seriously too. But I think it's easier to learn in that type of atmosphere rather than just sitting and being an absorber of information that I deliver to you. So consequently, not only is it my style is different, but my expectations of you are different too, right? You learn by interacting rather than absorbing. And as you talk about things, you come to understand them better. I often consider ourselves human beings, Homo sapiens. I kind of think of man, the storyteller. Sometimes we come to understand something by telling stories about it. And it's the same in the classroom. It's the interaction that really helps you learn. The other thing that I do a lot of is I put people into groups and we do group projects. This gives you hands-on, experience about whatever it is that we're doing. You can learn so much more by doing rather than by listening. Now, don't get me wrong, I do some lectures too, okay? It's part of the situation. but it's a more interactive type of education. And that's the way I was brought up. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a teacher. I learned that in graduate school, because graduate school is even more of that. Okay. You do a lot more of that in graduate school than you do in undergraduate school. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Frank. Actually, it raises such a great point, which I like to share with our students, potential students, and students when they're entering, is that education can actually be fun. If you've come from a background where you think, oh, it's tedious, it's onerous, and so on, it does not have to be that way. And so, if you take courses with our wonderful faculty from the U.S., I'll give you a technical term, Frank, that you can use in the future. This is from my own background within applied linguistics. It's known as the affective filter. So in each of our minds, there's a thing. Well, so it's hypothesized. Maybe Tommy knows more about this. But if you lower someone's affective filter, they will be able to intake a lot more than if they are anxious and tense when their affective filter is raised. And so it sounds like your classes could be great fun. And even though you're teaching very challenging and complicated material, the students are very open to it and derive great benefit.
Yeah, let me jump in. There's a guy we work with named Tom Feely. He's a former chair also. He's a great professor, and I've been trying to talk him to come to Singapore for a decade, and I haven't been successful. But one day we were just talking in the hall, and he says, "You know what, Frank? We have the greatest jobs in the world, right?" And that's because it's fun, okay? My wife says, "When are you going to retire? When you're going to retire?" And I say, "When they can pry the whiteboard marker out of my cold, dead hand." Okay. I love this job, and I love it because of the students and the material and engaging with them. And that's what I like.
Thank you, Frank. That sounds great. Christian.
I subscribe to the idea that the students should be your friends, not your students. I think that's perfectly fine. And I guess if you have a dialogue, then I guess teaching is a lot more effective. Now, that being said, you have to teach something because, my students, will be managing my retirement account. So if I don't do a good job, then I will retire poor. So it's true. Well, I would like actually, to think about my students as my colleagues in the professional finance, rather than just my students. I too enjoy teaching very much. I think there is one aspect that probably we strive, to put into teaching, I guess, in the education in the US, and then that is to encourage critical thinking. So we're not thinking about teaching a particular topic as, having a list of skills that you have to inflict maybe upon the students, but basically to prepare the students to use these things as basic tools, and then to sort of address challenges that we're not covering in classes. So because of that, as a faculty, I feel entitled to make sudden changes to what I do. I feel entitled to ask questions that probably could be solved with the things I taught, but are not exactly, in the list of practice questions for my test. And then if you're looking at the world around, there's a list of events that nobody thought that could happen, that you couldn't train for just by, learning a set of predetermined topics, right? So nobody thought that we'll, sit on the couch for 2 years because of COVID. Nobody thought that, Russia will start a war in the Ukraine. So these are all unexpected events that I think only critical thinking basically can solve and then help you address. So we'll strive to do a lot of that in our teaching. And then also we're trying to make sure that the students do relevant things. So work on projects that are current, work on projects that they could talk about in their job interviews. So a lot of experiential learning, in other words.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. In fact, I have two comments about that. One, a serious one, which is that the critical thinking aspect is incredibly important. So what we try to emphasize in across the board in our curriculum is not, rote memorization at all, but rather students learning concepts, learning theories and so on, which they can later take with them after graduation and apply to all of the different novel situations. You just don't know what's going to happen next nowadays in the world. We never have, but especially now. And so that ability to think critically and deal with these new situations is, I think, something that is incredibly important and is a very strong feature of the kind of curriculum that we employ. Second, please teach your students very well, Christian, because Frank and we don't want to eat cat food in our retirement. So we might have to if things work out badly. So let's turn now to Tommy. Yeah.
Food either. Yeah. Yeah, I think largely echoing a lot of what's been said. I think learning, in order to be effective and actually stick, you have to be involved in the process and not just sort of passively receiving it, right? And I think that that's a huge objective of this entire program. I think every instructor does a very good job of trying to manage that balance of instilling skills, but also getting a dialogue and getting something back from the students as well. And I think it has to be a bit open, and it has to be experiential, right? So I would say that I think a lot of education has focused on preparing specific skills and learning specific information, specific theories. And of course, that's important. But just as been mentioned, as we move through the next 10, 20 years, if you learn a specific skill set for a specific job, that job, as we have learned through COVID and we've seen over the past few decades, that job could disappear in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it could be gone. And that is a difficult situation to reconcile. And I think this generation, and this has started with my generation and continuing on, where I think a benefit is being more of a generalist, right? Where you have, just as been mentioned, you have skills that can transcend different job titles, right? Critical thinking, communication, being able to speak in public and with others actively and effectively, being able to communicate what's going on in your head, that is hugely important and relevant for any job that you could pursue, right? So I think with the level of uncertainty that we have moving for the next 10, 20 years, the kinds of training that we need to focus on is really going to be more of this model, interactive, more general, instilling those more human soft skills, communication, critical thinking, problem solving. And I really do think that this program is very much about that. I will commonly give my students a problem on the spot. They have not seen it before. I'll have I'll make up a social media company that is having this specific problem with their users. How do we fix it? Can we design an experiment that helps solve this problem? Can we prepare a survey that helps solve this problem? I think that this is the kind of system that really is necessary.
Just want to add one other thing, actually. So we also want to encourage entrepreneurial spirit and courage in the students. So we want them to try. And this is one thing actually that I've seen teaching courses in Singapore. So sometimes the students do not try because they're very careful and they fear that they will do or say something wrong. So I resolved it actually with my classes this semester to not give them a final grade up until they are wrong at least once in class, right? So if they haven't been wrong at all, it means that they haven't tried many times enough. And it doesn't mean that you have to be wrong in a deliberate way, by answering that 1 + 1 is 3. But, being wrong at least once with good intentions.
You can learn more by trying and failing than by succeeding on the first try, right? And one of the things I tell my students all the time is that questions are important. Sometimes I ask questions of the students, but I want the students to ask questions of me as well. And I always say, don't be bashful about giving a wrong answer. If you give me a wrong answer, that's a teaching moment, right? You'll remember yourself better, but I can help the rest of the class too from a wrong answer rather than a right answer. So don't be bashful about that.
And I can be wrong too. Actually, I give extra credit.
Yeah, me
if
too.
I'm proved Prove wrong. Yeah. Otherwise, how do I learn? And then if I don't learn, why do I do anything?
Practically, as my assistant knows over here, Ms. Candace, our assistant resident director, how many times do I start anything I'm going to say with, I could be wrong, but, anyway, so this is all excellent information. I think actually I should probably add that our three professors here teach upper level courses. And by the time the students come to these courses, they've already been through their lower level courses. It is absolutely recognizable that when students join our program, they are very shy, they are very quiet. This is to be expected from students who come from a particular background within their education that's very conservative, that's very lecture oriented. And students don't, there isn't an expectation that students will participate a lot. So how do they make the transition? Well, we have designed our curriculum in a way so that it will be very encouraging, that it will be from the very first semester organized in such a way that you have lots and lots and lots of opportunities to build up your skills and become comfortable so that by the time you reach the upper level classes, it's easier for you. I won't say that it's easy because you're overcoming different kinds of cultural tendencies that you've inherited. But all of these people, I think you can see they're friendly, they're wonderful people, and they really do encourage students to come to class and participate. It's a very unique kind of environment within here in Singapore, I would say. Okay, so let's see. I would ask at this point, we can come back to our panel, but does anybody in the audience have any questions, or has any questions come in? That was part of our program to also have questions that might be coming in from social media. Anyone have anything they would like to ask? Anyone in the audience here can just raise their hand if they have any questions at all, if you're not too shy. Any questions from anyone? Questions are more important than answers. Actually, seriously, I think, and remember, we are a research university, and a research university exists for what? To create new knowledge. It's not just a matter of taking existing knowledge and passing it on, but these people ask questions that have not been answered, and they find a way to answer them, and then contribute that to the entire world through their publications, presentations at conferences and so on. So when you join our program, this is the kind of people who are teaching you, the people who are answering unanswered questions. And it's such a great opportunity for our students to be a part of that. Okay.
From your faculty, whatever is it that you think will help you in your life. So don't be shy about it. I mean, you're the clients, and then, we're supposed to help. So go ahead and ask, how can we help?
Kind of similar to what we've been talking about already. I find that the students who are most successful in my upper level courses are those who aren't afraid to take on the uncertainty of the questions that we are facing. So just like you mentioned, we're used to thinking that there is a right and wrong, black and white answer to everything, but a lot of the things that we might be talking about in upper level courses haven't been answered yet. Researchers are trying to figure out strategies and experimental methods to answer these questions. And so it's open for interpretation, it's open for research. And so that can be a bit scary because we want answers and we want to know exactly what's happening. But I think students who are able to sort of walk into that uncertainty, I think do very well. I would also say being open to all the things that we've talked about, being open to learning how to communicate and share your ideas. I will say that I had this wonderful experience with a student just a couple of days ago where I asked her what she had gained from being in this program. And she was nearly in tears explaining to me that when she got here, she was so quiet, she was reserved, she was afraid to speak her mind. And just a couple short years later, she felt very comfortable speaking in public, having dialogues with her instructors and her peers. And she felt like the change and the transformation was just unreal. And she was, as she's entering her last year, it was honestly very rewarding to hear her say that.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. And that is not unique. I have seen that, over the 18 years of our program with so many of our graduates who come in as quiet little freshmen who would not say boo to a goose, and then they graduate and they just have such an impressive set of skills and are very self-confident, can express themselves extremely well. And I think Christian has something to add.
So the other thing is, I mean, you're thinking of university as, I guess you're coming in, then you're taking a number of classes, acquire a set of skills, and then you graduate. I mean, don't think that way. You're getting basically into an ecosystem of graduates that existed for, I don't know, 100 years, more than 100 years. So even after you graduate, you have to be part of this ecosystem and then try to meet other people who belong to it. Create business connections, try to meet more people. Even when you are students, actually try to do that. So the university is here to help, not just in the 3 years or 4 years that you're a student, but I guess for the rest of your lives also. So make use of that. Try to discover what this ecosystem is. Try to discover who else graduated from this university. Where are they? Can they give a job to you, to your kid? So, dedicate some time to that too, not just to, okay, I'll study, I'll pass these tests, I'll get the best grades. Just discover what else is in the university, not just courses.
Yeah, so one of the takeaways from what Christian has said are the three most important words in career development: networking, networking, networking. So you really have great opportunities here, meeting with our faculty, and then after graduation, the Alumni Association and so on. It is never too early to start networking, though, I would say. And I would also just like to add my own advice for people coming in. I've been working in education for my pretty much entire adult life in one form or another, including international education. And I have come to one conclusion, which is that no one ever in the history of the entire world has ever gotten more out of their education than they have put into it. And so therefore, my advice is day one, you come to class, try your best to really, really buy into the kind of pedagogy that we offer, which is highly participatory and highly experiential. We know it's a challenge. We know you have to try to overcome shyness and fear and risk aversion, all of these things that are sort of very typical characteristics within this kind of the outcome of the educational system here sometimes can make it very difficult for people to just automatically do these things. We would never expect that you would just be able to come in and do it. So as I say, we have structured things very purposefully and intentionally so that you can practice these things and come out in the end absolutely transformed, as Tommy was talking about. Okay, anything else has come in? Nothing. Okay, any questions from the audience? Oh, yes, okay, thank you. Okay, so in fact, that's a great question, because we also had some questions that were submitted in advance, and one of them has to do with program structure. So let me address that a little bit. So our program here in Singapore is people can complete it fully in Singapore. They also have the opportunity to go to the US if they want for some portion of it, but that's optional, completely optional. So we operate on a model whereby faculty come over. We would not be able to call this a University at Buffalo program. It's one of our accreditation requirements from the United States. For us to offer a University of Buffalo degree, we have to have a very substantial number of our faculty members come and teach here in Singapore. So about 60% of the courses are taught by faculty who come here from the US. they teach the entire course. They come here, they stay here for the whole semester. In some cases, they stay here for many semesters. Tommy has been here now almost continually since the start of the pandemic. But for Frank, and Frank has come here for spring and fall semesters in the past. Christian comes every summer. So we have regular faculty who come over and teach the entire course. Now, not 100% of the courses are taught by our visiting faculty. For many of our introductory level courses, for our general education courses, elective courses, and so on, we also have local instructors. And the local instructors are people who have similar qualifications. Many of them have doctorates from American universities, for example, not all of them, but many do. And they are people who are also very keen to deliver this kind of interactive education here within Singapore. And they're approved by the departments at the home campus. And the advantage of having these instructors as well is that they often have very, very good networks in Singapore within industry and so on. So having the combination of US faculty and local faculty here in Singapore is really, really beneficial for the students in so many ways. So that's basically how our program works. I hope, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Well, I want to, if I may add a little bit on.
I cannot see.
Well, I want to add a little bit actually while Kevin is reading the question. I can add a little bit to that answer. So while I teach courses in the summer, that doesn't mean that what I do with the students in Singapore stops after the summer. So we were saying earlier, we like to encourage students to pursue experiential learning projects. So one of the things that we do at Buffalo is we calculate an index of wage discrepancy in the US that's listed on Bloomberg. And we're trying actually to undertake that project for Singapore. So in the US, you have monthly data available. In Singapore, some data such as employment come quarterly, and then data on wages come annually. So I have a team of students from my summer classes actually that are trying to build this index for Singapore too. And I can see essentially that project stopping immediately after the summer. So that will continue throughout the semester, even though we'll not be taking a formal class. But we'll continue to do this work, and the students will receive credit that they'll be listed on the page of this index that will calculate. It's called the Job Quality Index. You can Google if you like.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Christian. That's just one of the many kinds of experiential things that students would have an opportunity. Tommy, maybe you could just mention your ELN, Experiential Learning Network project as well.
Yeah. So I have research that I've been conducting for several years now, examining how people deal with different stressors. So I currently have 5 research assistants, but I'm always looking for additional research assistants. Anyone who is interested in pursuing graduate studies in psychology, research is always extremely helpful and useful for preparing for those programs. So I currently have 5 students, each of which are working on different projects. So I have one student, I believe I mentioned, who's working on a research study examining how Singaporean students and how University of Buffalo home campus students manage their social medias and social media accounts, and how that impacts their day-to-day lives. I have another student who has done some work extending on some of our published research, examining what happens when individuals take on some sort of typical coping technique, and how that might impact their stress experiences. So for instance, with this particular project, she examines how immersion into nature and what we call like awe-inducing environments can actually stimulate positive stress and coping benefits. And we examine for whom that's going to be helpful and for whom it's not. I have one student who's interested in extending my decision-making research and examining for what kinds of individuals might having to choose from a large number of options might be stressful versus not. I have a number of different projects, all of which we embed within my broader research topic of examining cardiovascular responses to stress experiences. So that project is quite broad. Like I have a couple different specific areas of work, but each of my students has their own particular focus that they're interested in. And I work with them to generate their own ideas and to help make their ideas a reality. So for 3 of the projects so far, we've collected data on over 350 participants that we're analyzing and will be hopefully preparing for publication, and all those students will be obviously included as first authors of those publications if you know the data corresponds. So we have to wait and see how the data pans out, but that's the broad research mission.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so let me just address the questions that have appeared through Slido. And the first one has to do is the curriculum more what, exam based or project based? And I would say both. Actually, depending on the module that you take, the way it's structured really depends on how the professor of the course has designed it. I would say almost every single module is going to involve at least some level of participation and project work of various kinds. It could be individual, it could be group. So that's a very huge part of the curriculum. But there are certain modules which might be more oriented towards a kind of mastery of a declarative form of knowledge, which would lead to a final exam. But any module, if there is a final exam, it's probably not going to count for more than, say, 25, 30, at most, maybe about 35% of the overall grade. Why? Because what we use in all of our modules is something called continuous assessment, meaning that there are many, many, many different components. And it could be quizzes throughout the semester, presentations, projects, a midterm exam, a final exam. But if you're the kind of person who suffers from exam anxiety, in general, within our program, you have many, many other formats in which you can demonstrate your learning beyond just exams. So part of it is, I think, that we really believe in sort of authentic styles of learning and doing things. As we have talked about, you learn by doing. And so what do you learn from taking an exam? Well, maybe you can indicate that you have memorized this or that or the other thing, but it's not really the kind of thing that people do in real life. So we tend to focus our assessment schemes more on authentic kinds of things that people actually do. The second question here, I think, was something about the format of our classes. Are they physical or are there Zoom sessions? So are they physical or is it a Zoom session? Generally speaking, in an ideal world, our classes would be entirely physical, but as we know, it's not an ideal world. So sometimes, depending on circumstances, we now shift back to Zoom classes. Just as an example, one of our faculty members has COVID, and so she cannot come to teach her classes in person, but she's well enough to deliver them in Zoom while she's living out her period of isolation. So that's just sort of an example, but generally speaking, it is an in-person program. We have made adjustments as time goes on according to the environment and regulations given to us by the Singapore government about what we can and can't do. But most of the learning would be taking place in the classroom. Since it's a research academic university, will the teachings, learnings be more theory-based as opposed to application-based? Okay, actually, that's a good question. And I would say, it's really interesting. It's an interesting question in its own right, because if you think of education, international education, and the differences between different national approaches, if there is such a thing, the sort of traditional way of looking at it was that UK education tend to be more theoretical in nature, and the US education was more applied, where we talk about, we have case studies, the case study approach and so on, the different kinds of things that our faculty have been talking about. There's been over time a convergence. So the two systems are not that radically different as they used to be anymore. I think different systems are learning from each other and adapting what's good from other systems from around the world. So I would say the answer to that question is it's a combination. So application without a theoretical background it's weak, whereas theory without being able to apply it to anything on a practical level is also weak. So I think we do try as best we can to meld the two together into powerful ways where people can take theory and use it for authentic kinds of applications. Does that make sense to you guys? Would you all agree? Anything to say?
You should always, so in a theory-based education, I guess, whatever that is, I think you should always ask the question, why are we doing this? Right. So if there's no practical answer to that, then I don't know. I mean, you should get up and I don't know, leave the class perhaps. Or if you don't hear a satisfactory answer. I mean, I say this so I come from a math background, and then what bothers me sometimes in math is that we'd never apply the things that we'd learn. So I like applications. I mean, that's why you're doing things for the world, not in isolations.
Thank you. Okay, so I do recall actually there were a couple of other questions that had come in advance, and I'd like to address those too. One of them had to do with transfer credits. I'm sure everybody is interested in, if you join this program, what kind of waivers, what kind of transfer credits will you get? That's a very, very big question and a very relevant one, of course. So I'll just describe quickly how the process works. So when you apply to the University at Buffalo, you submit your previous transcripts from your, whether it's A level, whether it's Polytechnic, IB is a very common, more common one now than we've seen in the past. And it goes through a process at the home campus called articulation, which means that they take your previous experience, they look at what you are applying for, and they come up with the best match, the best combination to relieve you of the different requirements. So that reduces the overall number of courses you would have to take from University at Buffalo and to earn the degree. In certain cases, some people with Polytechnic diplomas can enter our program and have half of the credit requirements for their UB degree waived. So the requirement is 120 credits, but with certain poly diplomas that could be reduced to only 60, which is an incredibly substantial savings in both time and money to complete the degree. However, it's very difficult to say specifically, if you have this, then you will get that. So my advice for anybody with individualistic questions about that, talk to our staff outside. We have our academic advisors here today, and they can address your individual situation. But that's exactly how it works. UB will try as best they can to offer you the best package based on your previous studies, wherever they may have been. And let's see, any other questions? Any more questions from the audience? Anything that else has come in? Okay, so I think we're over time now a little bit. Any last words from our panelists? Anything you'd like to say?
Of the many campuses of the State University of New York. So let me brag a little bit about SUNY Buffalo. We have more private money than all the other SUNY campuses combined.
That's great to know. That's why we're the flagship.
Yeah, I guess just echoing, we would love to have you as part of our program. And if you have any questions for me at all afterward, please feel free to come up and ask. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Apparently, we have one more question. Okay, so these are also good questions. So what SIM has actually in terms of helping students with job placement during their time here for internships and so on after graduation, we have a in-house thing called, what is it called? Career Connect. Career Connect. And Career Connect is an office where there are numerous, there is a cornucopia of connections throughout the Singapore of with industry and so on, so students can approach them and see what's available by way of internships. We do not have internships built into our curriculum because some people don't want them, but if you want to do that, you absolutely have many opportunities for that. And what else was part of that question? Anything else? Yes, actually, never mind. OPT. Candace reminded me about OPT. Supposing you go over to the home campus in the United States and spend some time there. If you were to spend one academic year at the University at Buffalo, you are then eligible for what's called OPT, optional practical training. That means you can extend your student visa by 1 year in order to work or get an internship in the United States. And many of our students have done that as well. So the opportunities do exist. Again, it's up to the student to seek them out, and they're not automatic and they are competitive, these things, but there are lots of ways that we can help. University at Buffalo has its own, again, in-house career development office that can help people find opportunities over there as well. So I think we should probably end now so that people will have time between this and our next session to go have a bite to eat and talk to our people outside. I guess I will just conclude by saying I graduated from UB with a master's degree, and I had such a great time there. So I echo what Frank has said and everyone about UB being a great place. I loved my time there, and it really has been an incredible pleasure for me to be able to help deliver the same wonderful experience I had as a UB student to people who are here in Singapore and seeking an American education. So I hope that you have enjoyed the session today. I hope that you will consider applying to UB, and I hope even more that you will join UB and enjoy all of the wonderful experiences that we all share together as a really great community here in Singapore. So thank you for your attention today, and enjoy the rest of today's programs. Thank you.